Welcome, Pathfinders. Today we're going to talk about movement speed, tactical movement, and difficult terrain. During combat, you'll spend a lot of time moving, but before we can cover that, we need to know what your base land speed is. Your speed, while unarmored, is your base land speed, and is determined by a character's race, usually 20 feet for small-sized races like gnomes and halflings, and 30 feet for medium-sized races like humans, elves, half-elves, and half-orcs, except for dwarves, who are medium-sized but slow speed. Some classes, such as the barbarian and monk, provide enhancements to a character's base land speed. There is also the fleet feat that increases your speed by 5 feet each time you take it. In addition, there are spells such as Longstrider, Expeditious Retreat, and Haste that increase your speed as well. Next, you'll need to factor in your character's armor and encumbrance. Armor heavier than light armor reduces your character's base land speed. Medium armor reduces a 40-foot speed to 30 feet, a 30-foot speed to 20 feet, and a 20-foot base speed to 15 feet. Heavy armor causes the same reduction as medium armor, but you can only move 3 times your speed while running. We will cover the run action shortly. There are class abilities that remove this speed reduction, such as a fighter's armor mastery, and special materials that make armor one category lighter, such as mithril. Also remember that a dwarf's movement speed is not reduced by armor. In addition to armor, you need to factor in your encumbrance. All characters have a carrying capacity based on their strength score. You can find out what your character's carrying capacity is on page 171 of the core rulebook. If you are at a light load, your movement speed is not reduced. If you're at a medium load, your speed is reduced from 40 to 30, 30 to 20, or 20 to 15. If you're at a heavy load, you suffer the same reduction in speed and also can only move at 3 times your running speed, much like heavy armor. Remember that encumbrance also affects your maximum dexterity to your AC and causes a check penalty on all strength and dex-based skill checks. Also remember that a dwarf's movement speed, again, is not reduced by encumbrance. Bear in mind that if your character is wearing armor and encumbered, that you only use the worst figure. You do not stack the penalties. For instance, a character with a light load but wearing medium armor takes the speed penalties for wearing medium armor. However, the same character in medium armor but carrying a heavy load takes the heavy encumbrance penalties, not just the medium armor penalties. Now that we know our movement speed, let's look at tactical movement in combat. Most combat in Pathfinder is played out on a battle grid of 1-inch squares, where each inch represents 5 feet. A medium or small character takes up one 5-foot square on this grid. Your character's speed, factoring in armor and encumbrance, is how far you can move using a single move action in combat. If you want, you can also trade your standard action for a second move action, allowing you to move 2 times your movement speed. If you want to use a full round action to move, you can take the run action, allowing you to move 4 times your movement speed in a straight line, or 3 times if you're wearing heavy armor or carrying a heavy load. Remember that you lose your dexterity modifier to your armor class while using the run action, unless of course you have the run feat. To measure distance, count each square as 5 feet. So a character with a 20-foot movement speed can move 4 squares. The only exception is when you are moving at a diagonal, as each square represents 5 feet at a side. The distance from 2 opposite corners is actually 7.5 feet. To represent this, the first square counts as 1 square of movement, so 7.5 feet rounded down to 5. The second square of diagonal movement counts as 2 squares. 7.5 times 2 is 15 feet, so it makes 3 squares of movement to move those 2 squares. The third counts as 1 again, and the fourth counts as 2, and so on and so forth. You cannot move diagonally past the corner of a solid object, such as a wall, but you can move diagonally past a creature, even an opponent, or other obstacles such as a pit. You can move through a square occupied by a friendly character unless you are taking a charge or run action. You cannot, however, move through a square occupied by an opponent, unless that opponent has the helpless condition. Some creatures may present an obstacle to movement even when helpless and count as difficult terrain. You can also use the overrun combat maneuver to move through an opponent's square, or attempt to tumble past using the acrobatics skill. Finally, You can move through the squares occupied by a creature 3 size categories larger or smaller than you without penalty, though it does still provoke an attack of opportunity. So a medium creature, such as a human, can move through a square occupied by something diminutive, such as a rat, or gargantuan, such as a dragon. Some creatures, such as a gelatinous cube, occupy the entire space, and so you cannot move past it, even with acrobatics or similar abilities. Note that you cannot injure movement in a square occupied by a creature, friend or foe, unless they are helpless. The exception to this is any creatures that are fine, diminutive, or tiny in size. The last consideration you need to make during movement is difficult terrain. Difficult terrain are features that affect your movement, be it loose stone, tangled undergrowth, or even steep stairs. Each square of difficult terrain counts as 2 squares of movement. Each diagonal move in difficult terrain counts as 3 squares of movement. You cannot run or charge in difficult terrain. You can, however, make a double move. Some obstacles hamper movement as well. Each obstructed square counts as difficult terrain and costs 2 squares of movements. This is in addition to the movement cost to enter the next square. So a low wall requires 3 squares of movements, 2 to get over the wall, and 1 to enter the square on the other side. Some objects are impassable, and their squares cannot be entered. This concludes our look at movement in combat. In our next video, we will cover attacks of opportunity and what actions provoke them. I hope this information helps you in the adventures to come. Good luck, Pathfinders.